Amazing, amazing conversation that's about to happen here. I'm sorry it's so hot. Hopefully we'll get more breeze, not like yesterday though. And today, community-focused innovators shaping brand culture. And I really want to welcome you with all my heart. I'm so happy you're all here and back here today. Imari Oliver, founder and CEO at Bond and Play, is going to moderate. And I'll let you take the introductions from here. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, everyone. Good morning. I don't know, when I got here this morning, it was like this hurricane breeze here, and all of a sudden it just stopped, and then the heat just popped up. I don't know what happened, but good morning. Oh, wow, y'all are like, I know last night was popping, but can we try that one more time? Good morning.
Good morning.
We made it. So I'm just gonna jump in, and we have some amazing folk, and I'm excited. So I'm just gonna first start with my right. I'm gonna just do I'm just gonna say their name and title, but I'm gonna let them jump in and really tell their story. So on my immediate right, we have Bernice Chao. She's the co-founder of Asians in Advertising, and she's the author of the book, The Visibility Mindset. So let's give it up for Bernice. I always like these WWE introductions. It kind of just makes it a little more interesting. I mean, we are in Cannes. Next is brother Vincent Bragg. He's the founder and CEO of ConCreates. So let's give it up for Vincent. A good friend, a long time friend. We've known each other, I don't even know how long since we started in advertising. She was one of our earliest supporters. Sabrina Macias, I still said it right. Okay, I got it. She's the Vice President of Global Communications for DraftKings. Let's give it up for Sabrina! And now, last but not least, is my guy. I call him the OG in advertising, so I knew Jimmy way before he even knew I existed on this planet. And I always thought he was just super dope. And when I interviewed him a few years ago, and I just thought it was an incredible thing. So Jimmy, I think you guys make sure you Google everyone here, because these are very dope individuals, and it's not often that you get everyone to be on a stage like this. But Jimmy is the CGO of Amusement Park Entertainment.
I like that, CGO.
That's what they got, brother, on my eyes was, but we'll make it sound, CGO.
I like that.
I said it's the Chief Growth Officer, it's the Chief something. But either way, you're gonna make it work. But let's give it up for Jimmy Smith.
All right. Please say the legend.
Okay, so we're going to jump right in. So, Bernice, can you just tell us a little bit about you, your background, but more importantly, what are you passionate about?
So for me, my passion really lies in helping others. And so where I can do the most impact is something that is really authentic to me. And so when I first started my career, my impact really was about sharing what this industry is to people who don't get the opportunity to see it. So I actually spoke a lot in schools, especially in at-risk areas, and I realized when I did speak, people really resonated with someone that looked like them, whether that was a female, a person of color. And for me, as being an introvert, it didn't come easy to speak, but I found the value in being present and representing for that. And so in the last 3 years, that shifting has kind of gone a little bit more toward my community, which is the Asian American community, especially because that lived experience of what does being visible look like. When we talked about earlier about how I felt so invisible in my career, and I spent so many years pushing big brands and giving them the platform, that visibility, but I felt so small and insignificant and overlooked. Really go, oh, a lot of that comes from my cultural background. We're taught to assimilate, we're taught to shrink. And so for me, the last couple of years is really about showing that visibility. What are the tools that I've learned, and how can that help uplift a community to have that voice?
Oh, great, thank you. A slight little change on it, but tell a little about your, because your story is very interesting and what you've created. So what drives you as well?
You know, I feel like I'm gonna say something similar. I mean, we founded this company on the belief system that creativity without opportunity is what leads to criminality. And so, if we're able to start thinking about, let's look at it from this perspective. If I would have known this industry even existed, I probably would have never done anything illegal, right? Like, all we're doing is selling ideas. I wouldn't have sold any drugs or anything like that if I could have known that this space existed. And so how do we start to provide that opportunity, and, you know, just to, you know, take visibility a step further? Like, it's not visible to communities like where we come from. I still have to have these arguments at the cookout. like my grandma still think I'm selling drugs. She'd be like, so Mark Zuckerberg just giving you money, huh? For real?
Wow. All right. I love that one. Sabrina, so
Yes,
let's
sir.
talk a little bit about you and what you've been doing, and also just say a little bit about your career journey, because I'm fascinated how you moved through from PR to where you are now at DraftKings.
Yeah, absolutely. So my career, my background is kind of telling other people's stories. And so I've been across most industries, starting on the agency side and then moved into sports and try to spend my time kind of helping others that could, you know, benefit from either my skill set or my resources or the resources that I have access to. I still, you know, work in communications, but try to also help from a volunteer perspective to, you know, just kind of provide counsel to small brands or companies that are looking to grow, especially when it comes to impact. So yeah, and it's been a wild ride, like 20-something years now in New York. And yeah, I enjoy it. That's how I met you on TEDx Harlem, and I also counsel for Vincent on ConCreates. So it's great to like bring your skill set to the table and help others in a way that like I think is really impactful.
Oh, that's great. Jimmy, the last time we spoke, you were working on the Harlem Globetrotters Snoop NFT project. But tell us a little bit more about your background quickly and some of the things you've done and maybe one or two things that you think define kind of your work or you.
Ooh, I don't know about it. Let's see. You got a few questions wrapped in there, but Nike Freestyle is in the Smithsonian. And what I love about that is, just a quick story. So I'm at Wieden and Kennedy, and this guy, Bob Garfield. Anybody remember Bob Garfield from Mad Age? So he reviewed it, and he said, it's going to win the Grand Prix at Cannes. It's going to win the Grand Prix. And I'm like, damn. So I ran upstairs to Dan. I said, Bob Garfield says it's going to win the Grand Prix. And can I go to Cannes? So this would have been my first time. And he's like, yeah, you can go to Cannes. And I said, dope. So I went home, started packing, came back in the next day to get the ticket and get on out of there and say, Jimmy, they said over at Cannes they had to beg just to get it on the short list. It's just a bunch of players dribbling the basketball, black players dribbling the basketball. It ain't gonna win. And now it's in the Smithsonian. So I always take these award shows with a grain of salt.
Talk about redemption, right? So, you know, the panel, we're talking about community, and I guess we talked the wind up again, and so it's like, you know, we're just gonna show out, right? It feels good, though. Let's talk about, you know, community and brand. It seems like everyone's work is an intersection of community and brand. So, Bernice, starting with you, what does that describe what that means to you when you say the intersection of community and brand, particularly as what we were talking about, which is some of the things with Asian culture and Asian American culture?
I'm trying to remember what we talked about, but I'm gonna freestyle here. And so for me, I just want to see more voices on screen. I remember growing up and watching TV and going, no one here looks like me. I don't identify with the story. And for me, kind of moving forward in the next chapter of my nonprofit, it is how can we have more of the stories? How can we celebrate those stories when they show up? And how do we get more visibility for those? How do we get more people to encourage them? Because it is hard. It's hard to tell stories that people aren't familiar with. It feels like it might not do a good job. It feels like it might not, spread. It might not have those legs. But we've seen in the last year or two that when there are stories that are different, that people actually find commonalities with them and they actually do identify and it actually does break through. And so especially for my nonprofit, in the next generation and next year, we want to really amplify those voices. We want to encourage that. We want to even do an awards show. How can we hold leaders to keep pushing forward those ideas and really celebrating for the work that they do push through? And so my hope going forward is, I know we've seen in the last year that the representation actually has gone down. DEI departments have actually shrunk. Representation has gone back 20%. People, I think this year, there was 0 Asian American celebrities. I think there was 0 Asian directors. I think there's 1 Black director on Super Bowl this year. And it's the idea of we're sliding back. And so what I really would hope, and I want to help as much as I can, is how do we keep pushing forward? How do we not go back to that place of complacency, of what's comfortable, and how do we keep fighting forward?
Great, thank you. Vincent, what was the genesis, or what was, what gave you the idea of ConCreates? Like, why did you see there was a need for it, and how did you start?
I love telling this story, but I usually tell it with my business partner because we got like our lines down. So I'm gonna try to do his part too. I'm gonna be David Ruffin. So, once upon a time, in a lifetime not long ago, I happened to build a $350 million drug empire. My partner over here allegedly robbed 27 banks, and we were put on what we like to call an adult timeout. So we were sent off to federal prison where we just educated ourselves, right? We just studied everything that we could. It's kind of like a school for the X-Men, if you will. And so we're watching TV one day, happened to see an NFL player by the name of Joseph Randle, got accused of stealing underwear. And so we dig into it. We're like, wait a minute, this dude's like a top draft pick, just signed for millions of dollars. Like, why is he stealing underwear? That doesn't make sense. So come to find out, his son is going through what they call the terrible twos, and he takes his son outside to console him and forgot to pay for the items that he had, some cologne and a pair of underwears. We happened to be in prison with the founder of this underwear company called MeUndies. We had the bright idea. Obviously we had to twist his arm because they're like, you're taking advice from fucking guys in prison. But in the end, they do it and it goes viral. Gave away MeUndies at separate charity events. It happened on a Thursday, was it? By Sunday, Stephen A. Smith is reporting. It goes crazy. And so we had this, what I like to call the Moses moment, right? I go disappear for a minute. I'm starting to think about this. I come back. I see Joe. I'm like, hey, when you see a McDonald's commercial, who do you think's doing that? And his answer was McDonald's. And I'm like, no, it's an agency that does that. They hire people to come up with this stuff. And he was like, well, shit, we could do that. So I'm like, duh, that's what I'm getting at. So, but what would we call it? We kicked around a couple ideas, and it became ConCreates, convicts that create.
I love it. That's dope. Thank you. Sabrina, so let's talk about your career and how that impacts the work you do with the community. You have your son here with you. How does all of that, I'm always curious when you're like, how do they, because I was like, that's your son, he's like way bigger than you and stuff. I mean, but like, how do your work, how do you make sure that you leave a lasting impact on him, his friends, and your community about the work that you're doing, and even at DraftKings, because that on itself is a whole thing with the intersection of sports and betting and all of these things like that. How do you begin to bridge that gap and show them that there are possibilities, what the potential and possibilities are?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with like what Bernice said about representation and just like trying to make sure people are aware that this industry exists, whether it's marketing or PR or now social media, like social managers, all of these different career opportunities I think is really important because that's how the stories get told. And so trying to like connect those dots and connect the right people and introduce people like, hey, you should know this person, like you guys should talk, you know? And I think just moving through your career and with that purpose and impact and idea of like, okay, we can do better, you know, there's better ways to make sure that our stories are told. And, you know, I think just being purposeful in those conversations and whenever you have a seat at the table, you know, kind of pushing that agenda forward. And yeah, I think being brave to, you know, continuously push that envelope and encourage people to be broader in their thinking. Yeah, and I think the exposure to the industry, because there's so many facets of like how you can approach the industry. And my son and I were talking yesterday about like, oh, you could be part of an events team. You can be part of, you know, the digital piece of it. There's so many components to it that I think require the exposure. And I think about this a lot. I'm like, where do we start? Is it high school? Like, do we have to go speak at high schools for them to know that this career exists? Because maybe by the time, you know, I do a lot of speaking in colleges, and I'm like, but maybe by the time they get to college, they've already had to select their major, and they don't even know that this is a possibility. So should we be looking at younger people and trying to tell the story at that level so that they can think about this as a career opportunity for them, and they're not thinking that, like, you know, we're all sitting behind a desk all day, because that's not what we do at all. I barely spend any time behind a desk, but a lot of time when I speak to kids and they are like, oh, you're an executive, I don't want to be sitting behind a computer all day. And I'm like, actually, I don't think I remember the last time I sat at a desk, you know? But I think it's about telling these stories and making sure, I don't know at what level, and I'd love your feedback, but you know, that we need to start to like introduce these careers so that people like us, you know, take interest and don't think that, you know, the only way out or the only way through is to be a celebrity or to be a influencer or those kinds of things. There are people behind the scenes that, you know, kind of make these things happen, and it's just about kind of bringing that to the forefront of, you know, our communities so that they're aware that we exist. And I agree, when my parents have no idea what I do at all, like nobody. And I'm like, it's fun. I really
Jimmy, you've done quite a bit in your career, and everyone in the ad world identifies you as one of the leaders in this space for us as we're coming up. How do you motivate and inspire the next generation through your work or personally to make sure that that connection is maintained from generation to generation, and we're not, as Bernice said, it feels like we're sliding back where we're losing any momentum that we created? What do you think are some strategies to ensure that we don't lose, but instead we accelerate or even scale involvement of people of color in advertising?
I think there's like 4 things, and they've already mentioned the one, making sure that folks who don't know about the career know about it. The other one we have, We're All the Black People, that we started for the One Club. And my family, my sons, like yours, they're in the business. Well, they're in the business because I'm in the business, and they're doing their thing, and we'll be doing Zooms and whatnot. Next thing you know, they got Corey, and they got Patrick, and they got these other cats who would have not been in the business. But the most important one is the folks of color that are actually, to me, on the brand side specifically, need to hire and bring on the folks and not be gatekeepers and blocking. And that's what I've experienced a lot I'm sure you guys have too. Despite all the experiences, all the accomplishments and whatever and whatnot, they'll go along and do the same thing that their forefathers and mothers in the industry that are white do, and hire another white agency, or hire another white director, or hire another white writer, and so on and so forth. And we call them Stevens. If anybody's seen Django, that's what we call them. That's Samuel Jackson's character.
We're going to come back to that one because I have some thoughts on that. But Bernice, one of the things we talked about is the role of culture and community, and how you were raised, and it's interesting that we all said our parents probably don't know what we do, and I would add my mother, and they have no idea what I'm doing. People think I fix computers for a living. So, and I'm just like, go with it, go with it. So how does the way you've been raised in your community culture plays a role in how you approach, or how you had to approach, your career?
This has been a very large learning for me, especially recently. Because when my parents came here, I'm first generation American. I'm the only American born in my family. And so with that, it comes with a lot of things that worked in their country. So my parents actually came from Taiwan. And for us, it's all about being humility, right? Humility, harmony, and hierarchy. And so when I'm in a creative brainstorm and someone's voice is really loud, my voice gets quiet. I'm not taught to go against something, to push against something. I'm not taught to talk back. And so I realized that this is actually a really important skill set. But I was not taught to be this, what is successful in this country. And that took a lot of personal learning and unlearning. And so one of the things that I did recently was I released a book in November, because a publisher reached out to me, because I think they Googled me and found my organization, and was like, I like that you're providing skill sets for other Asians to kind of learn how to unlearn certain things. And there's never been a career book for this community. And I was like, how is that possible? And I Googled, and I was like, oh my gosh, it wasn't just me. None of us had these tools. None of us has been sharing these tools with one another, because we're all taught that when we ask for help, it's shame. When we ask for advice, it's shame. When we can't do something, it's failure. And we never share those vulnerabilities. It's all about what is positive. And a lot of that, seeking perfection, never helped us push forward, and never helped us come together and work together as a community. And so for me, it's really important to just talk about these things. It helps me to talk about the data for this community, because there wasn't data before. Right. And this community actually put the money together to have this data even exist. And so for me, one of those big eye-opening points was during COVID, and I remember watching the news, because a lot of us had the news on all the time, and it was like alien communities, and it was white, black, Hispanic. Where were Asians? Wuhan, China virus, Kung flu. And so the only thing we were recognized was being part of the virus. And it was never, we were scapegoated, right? We were conveniently blamed and left out of being Americans. And it dawned on me, I was like, I'm not a big voice. However, if I don't say something, if our community doesn't say something, this is where we're gonna be. And so it's been really remarkable to find my own voice and help my community find their voice and their presence. And so we talked about how that one day where I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna put together a Squarespace website, I'm just gonna throw it out there, we're gonna be one-on-ones, we're gonna be in a Zoom room, 20 people, would be amazing. And out the gate, we had 650 people signed up. And I was like, wow, this is more people I even thought that was in the industry. And we're 2 years out, and we're over 5,000, we're global. So it's,
dope.
You never know what you can create and what other people need. And I feel like the authenticity of what I felt like I needed really resonated with so many others.
So thank you for sharing that. Vincent, let's talk about bias perceptions. Sure. So particularly your journey into getting into advertising and marketing, there's still those when they first hear your background, they're like, whoa, they might take a step back first because they don't know what to expect, right? Because you're not the norm, right? So talk about that and what strategy you had to employ to overcome that and build confidence in what you're doing.
So I'm glad you asked that question because, 2,200 people told me no. Knocking on doors, knocking on doors, knocking on doors. I remember doing a Silicon Valley tour, and I went to everybody up there. The artist formerly known as Facebook. I was at Indeed, I'm not Indeed, LinkedIn. I went to Google, Google X, Google.org, like all of these different spots. And I end up at eBay, and I'm pitching eBay. And the guy pulls me to the side, and he says, I love your story. My brother's doing life in prison. But do you think these people gonna trust a $100 billion brand to a bunch of convicts? And I'm like, I didn't think it through, but that's what I thought. I thought that they would. And so, you know, I'm like, let me get back to you. Let me try to figure something out. So we get to talking, we're all, you know, banging our heads against the wall, and, you know, we kind of thought and used the same strategy that you use even in prison, right? Like, you create your foundation, right? You go get your homies, right? You go get the people that's in your space that are already trusted. And so I built an advisory board with folks like Sabrina Macias, Jimmy Smith, you know, and, you know, Jamie McLaughlin. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things that kind of changed the game for us, because now, you know, we're able to say, hey, they're going to look at this work. We're going to show them the work. They're going to be able to help vet. They're going to give their expertise and make sure that this thing is polished. And we've been crushing it.
Congratulations. Love
I
it.
think that goes back to what Jimmy was saying about the allies and, you know, the people not being gatekeepers, but actually propelling and helping to carve those paths.
And that leads me to my next question for the two of you. Being in the ad and PR space, and you've worked with a lot of large brands for a long time, what are some of the things, if you had to talk to a brand and tell them, well, look, you guys need to rethink, and you can say whatever you want to say. I'm not going to put a filter on you. But if you had to give them some advice, because sometimes I think they miss the point in a lot of different ways, and it makes it much more difficult for us to communicate the value of what we bring to the tables, particularly as we lead with culture in a lot of ways. So what are some of the things you would tell them and the power of your community to help them as a brand?
I think what's really helpful now, I mean, when I started this, it was more just like insights, and like we were, you know, multicultural marketers, and we were brought in because, oh, you're brown, like come do this pitch with us and, you know, have some representation. And as that story has evolved, I think there's now a lot of data, like actual data that shows, like, you know, the power of each of the consumers, you know, any multicultural consumer, and their spending power, their, you know, like what they can contribute to the brand. And I think that's like actually the easiest way to sell it in, is like it just makes business sense. Like, forget about the, you know, it's the right thing to do and all of that kind of stuff. Like, it's good for your business, which is something that we've been recently been able to do, I would say, over the last like 5 to 7 years, but has made it so much easier to get these ideas, you know, pushed forward, or to bring, you know, diversity of thought to the table, because the research is there. Like, it's evident, and not only in the consumer spending and the like where they spend their money, but also in the influence. And it's very clear from an influential perspective that our communities are driving those stories and driving that influence. So now it's like pretty easy to see and tell that story, which makes it great, I think. I don't know how you feel, but it's made it much easier to kind of push that forward because the data just kind of speaks for itself almost.
Yeah. And that's an important point. And Jimmy, we're going to piggyback on that. I see culture, particularly black and brown culture. You turn on a TV show, you see a commercial, you have a concert, any of those things, I see it's probably more general market audiences appearing in some of these things than when we have like events where people are actually saying things. How do you just talk to brands about the power of culture but not only leveraging and using culture, but also supporting the people that are creating the culture and designing it and living it and breathing it every day?
I have no idea. I'm serious. I marvel at, in a bad way, at Trump and what the things that he says, the things that he does, and he has, I don't know how many millions of votes he got, right? It's like, who's listening to that? Somebody's believing it, and I'm going someplace with this where I was thinking about it. I said, what am I going to say? Yesterday I had 2 panels and a panel and keynote. And what am I going to say and whatever, and I started thinking about it. It's like church, and I said this yesterday. The Bible says, you know, don't just listen to the word, but do. If you just listen to the word and don't act upon what you heard, it's like looking at a mirror and forgetting who you are. And so you got however many people come to these panels, have been doing this shit for how many years and whatever and whatnot, and we still doing the same bullshit, right? It's like, with these questions that you're asking, that was in 2001. That was 20-something years ago, and here we are having that same question. So the question is, how do we get them to, folks to act as opposed to just hear? I mean, and Disney might be getting at that of all people. They got that show, I don't know if you've seen it on Disney Plus. That shit is the bomb. I can't wait to get back home to, you know, finish up the rest of the series.
American Born Chinese?
Yes, yes. Y'all hear that? Say that one more time.
American Born Chinese.
It's fucking dope. So getting, I think the next step is figuring out how to get folks to not just listen, but to act.
Yeah, no, totally agree, totally agree. Let's think about words. Give me a word that you feel like you think is a word that defines you or describes your superpower. Like what makes you special or unique? And I'm not going to go in order. Whoever has the first word, this can be like hit the buzzer, Family Feud style. And you just, whatever word comes to mind, say that word and why that word is important to you.
I always, when I get this question, I always say I'm scrappy. And I haven't beat this word for myself. I feel like there's always a way through. I think I'm stubborn, and I think there is a solution out there if I just work at it. And so I feel like I can figure out my way out of things. And I feel like that scrappiness is what really defines me.
I love it. Scrappy. All right.
I would say determined, and it's everything we've been talking about, just like pushing the envelope and trying to, you know, kind of have the impact and carry this conversation so that we're not doing this again next year.
New conversations next year.
Yes, new conversation.
I would say kind. And I think, you know, there's a difference between being kind and nice, and I think sometimes nice can be deceitful or almost patronizing, right? Like you don't want conflict or anything like that, but kindness, you know, when you move from an act of kindness, like the impact is an impact. There's a bit of empathy that sits there, and so, you know, even being kind to yourself, you know, taking baths when you have 11-hour flights. It's a fact. It's a fact. Oh, you gotta go do your word. No, because I wanted to say something to the idea of when you ask the question of what would you say to a brand. I'm like, I hope he come back around with this.
Well, let's go for it.
I think the easiest way to look at it is stop looking at us as an afterthought.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, Black Lives Matter kicks off. Why? Because somebody got murdered in front of everybody, right? Someone says the N-word and gets canceled. Now, all of a sudden, we got to be a certain type of way. It's an afterthought. Something happens. Oh, my gosh, we need this. Let's call in them, right? Oh, my God, we were so insensitive to this particular group of people. Let's call them in. That is an afterthought. You wouldn't have those problems if you were actually bringing these creatives, these minds, this diverse thought, into the work. And so, you know, guys can go and run tell brands. That's what I said.
Don't play with it, right? Brother Jimmy.
Possible. And that just means to me, we try and tap into our Heavenly Father, who's the ultimate creator. Figure and he said all things are possible, so everything's possible.
Great, no. And last night reminds me, I was having dinner with some folk, and they asked me how I felt about it, and I said, it's exhausting. Because exhausting, as you just said, for 20 years, and we're still having these same conversations, and at some point, you go, well, what's next? Like, is it another 20 years? And we'll be on this stage, well, it won't be me, it could be you guys, but will we be here discussing and asking these same questions again and not moving to other questions that matter?
What has to happen, again, doing a deep think on it, why did Berry Gordy sell Motown? Why did Bob Johnson sell BET? Why did Al Bell sell Watt Stax? For those who don't know, staple singers, Isaac Hayes and Barkays and all that kind of stuff. And that's what needs to happen. All these groups need is if no disrespect, because I love Steve Jobs, but we keep relying on Steve Jobs, keep relying on Mark Zuckerberg, keep relying on Bill Gates and whatever. Clearly, that establishment is not going to do it.
Right.
We got to create our own shit from the ground up, and then don't be like Steven and handle your business. That's what needs to happen. I've heard, I won't mention his name, but one of the richest African Americans, one of the richest black folk in the world, he's the number 3 richest black person in the world. Number 3. And he's worth like 7-9 billion. I said, shit. How much is Zuckerberg and Gates and whatever? It's like even just pennies. And his attitude is, well, I made mine, I'm good. I'm good. No, you're not good, because we ain't good. Mm-hmm. If the whole is not good, you are not good.
That's a fact.
Black, white, blue, purple.
That's a fact.
No, I agree.
I was gonna say, we all have the ability, right? Like, we all can create something. So even this year, it's my first year at Cannes, and I was like, we need representation here. What I heard was there wasn't people that looked like me in mass quantities last year. And so I partnered with a couple of other API-owned businesses, and we have a cafe here. Super scrappy, something small. It's called Stop at Nothing. And it's our first year here, and my first year. And it was just an idea. And if you're free tomorrow, 3 to 6, we're at the Stop at Nothing Cafe. But
choice now.
We're coming.
I'm like, I'm not a huge person. I don't have billions of dollars. But I have an idea, and we're all so creative, and we're scrappy and determined and kind, and we can do this, where it's possible, right? And so I believe all of us in this room, on this panel, all of it, we don't have to wait. We can do it now, today.
Oh, the last question. I want to move into the future a little bit. And this one where you're going to really have to put your creative thinking hats on as creatives. So take a moment. But imagine us 10 years from now or 20 years from now sitting here. What is the question that you want to answer 10 to 20 years from now? And we're not talking about the stuff that we're talking about today. But given that everything has changed, we've done the things that we wanted to do, what is the question that you feel you will be most excited to answer 10 to 20 years from now?
I'm not going first.
I would say, like, how did you guys make it happen? You know? How did you do it? And hope that we're, part of that story.
I hope they ask, what was it like back then? What was it like when being the only female in a creative department? What was that like? Because now it's just normal. I hope they look at me when I, tell my kids TV used to end. Like, I hope they have that same sentiment with like, oh, what was it like to not be in a diverse group? What was it like to be the different voice? Because now it's all normal. I would hope that, like, someone asked me what the legacy I want to leave behind, and I just want them to know it's possible, right? And that's the legacy I want to leave behind with that.
How do we build on what you did? That would be for all of us. How do you build? You all did that, made the possible, made the impossible possible. How do we take it to the next level?
That's good.
I don't got an answer.
Yes, you do.
I don't really got one, like, because I feel like if we do what we doing, like, there's not gonna be any questions, right? They're gonna see it, right? It's gonna be laid out. Is this a question that I could ask?
No, what question would you want someone to ask you? So,
I know. I'm saying I don't know if it's that. I'm wondering if it's a question that I would ask them.
All
But
right.
I don't know. This sun killing me.
It's all right.
I ain't gonna lie. The breeze starting to feel good, but I've been baking up here, bro.
No, this is great. I don't know how much time we have. I don't know who's my timekeeper, because I would love to.
I don't.
We have some time, or it's time to wrap, or I have 5? All right. Let's get if the audience, because it's important, this is always interactive, and there's always people in the audience maybe a little smarter than all of us. So is there anyone that has any questions? Okay, you go for it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Abrams. I run an amazing nonprofit called Walker's Legacy Foundation that supports Black and brown entrepreneurs. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. Cut my teeth in corporate. Geico, 23 years ago, I landed at corporate office and worked in marketing for a really long time. Didn't see a lot of me. I'm not just Black, I'm from the Caribbean. So when you talk about your cultural lived experiences, it's so familiar. This sentiment of humility. So thank you for sharing your story, all of you. Vince, I love hearing you talk. I can hear you tell this story over and over again. The one thing this room, and this is the consistency in these panels, I feel like we're preaching to the choir, right? And I was raised by a bunch of old white men. So like, how do we get the people who are still in inherent privilege aligned with those of us who are in situational seats of privilege, where we do have collectively access, power, and influence to really move and shift? And what I hear all of you saying is that this is the route for true legacy building, because what we're all doing is paving the way for generational wealth creation. Economists predict it will take 228 years for Black people to catch up to white wealth, and I hate that statement, because it's like, how are we catching up? We didn't start at the same place. So there's nothing to catch up to. So how do we create and create a blueprint for us to really have disruption, so that we're not sitting here 20 years from now having this story, trying to figure out how we get representation in the room, but also have amazing companies and brands like Jimmy, your kids working in your company. How do we create that space? So just challenging us to be anti-gatekeepers, but really using our seats of situational privilege to get the folks who are in partnership in making the decisions to actually move that needle.
Thank you. Any comments, thoughts?
I just want y'all to know, this man is one of the most creative people I ever met in my life. He's so creative that instead of calling his son Jimmy Smith Jr., he called him Sequel. That's his whore.
I love that.
It is. Cool. Any other things? And before we leave, we'll wrap it up soon. I just want to give our esteemed panelists first. Give them a round of applause for Bernice, Vincent, Sabrina, and Jim, and give them an opportunity, if you choose, your parting thoughts for your experience at Cannes of 2023.
I want to follow up on that question because I feel like that would be a great parting thought as well. We have to work together. We have to not work from a place of scarcity, from a place of abundance, and by helping one another and connecting those dots, we can do that. We can open doors, we can open up opportunities, and we can really uplift this community, but we have to do it as a group.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the most important piece, is just making sure that we're making the right connections and creating almost like our own network of, growth and opportunity and connections, and, kind of creating that golf network within our communities as well. And I think that's the only way to kind of push it all forward.
I don't know if this makes sense. It's not fully formulated in my mind, but I think the way white corporate world does things, capitalism is dope. The way it's used, how it's interpreted, is fucked up. To think, oh, we'll just use some human beings, and so we don't have to pay them, and then this work. We're making money, so that works. Oh, I didn't know until I met Vincent Grease that in the Constitution, you need to speak on that. In the Constitution, there's a rule to allow free labor. They didn't make us just free and that was it. There's no such thing as slavery. They just put it in, okay, if you get arrested and lawfully arrested, then we can use you for free labor. So, and then, okay, we lost this client. Rather than coming up with another idea, we lost this client, so we're going to fire 10% of the staff, as opposed to coming up with another idea, because I got to keep my bonus, I got to keep this and whatever and whatnot. How it's being used is broken. We need to take capitalism and reinvent it to a way that works for all humanity. That's what I would say to your question.
That's good. All right, Vincent, last word, and then we're going to just go out and go into the world.
I think to kind of take his thing and say something that I think might sound poetic or something. It's really just about doing the right thing, right? It's like, 4,800 brands benefit off of prison labor, right? We always talk about, I want to eat like this and I want to do like this, but you're not realizing that he's answering the phones in Forest City, Arkansas for a telecommunications company, or I'm picking groceries that you guys think, oh, these are organic. Man, we organically grew this shit, you know what I'm saying? So, it's about doing the right thing, because when you do start to shine a light, under people's beds, like the roaches scatter, you know what I mean? And so I think we need to just do the right thing. Like this, as a brand, it's in our ethos, it's in our ecosystem that, our folks own a piece of the company. It's ownership involved. It's kind.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's a kind thing. So just be kind, do the right thing.
Well, thank you again, and I think this gives us an opportunity to decide, and it's all about choices. And we could decide, and I think you've all said it in different ways, to just work together and partner. And everyone is doing so many incredible things. And I think for our audience, whoever going to be watching this later on, is find opportunities to partner. Like you're not gonna lose, and this is almost a win-win. This is the closest you're going to get to a win-win situation that you're going to ever get. Like there's a casino there. I would rather bet on this team and this panel and what's happening than spend $1 at the blackjack table, because I already know what's going to happen, because I'm going to chase it, because I'm not going to lose that $1. So, this is an opportunity.
Put two down.
So let's give it up again for our panel, Bernice, Vincent, Sabrina, and Jimmy. Thank you all.